Ground cover, pollinator food, edible leaves, a clue about your soil. Most gardeners would never connect those benefits with one word: weed. We see something growing where we did not plant it, and the reaction is almost automatic. Pull it, toss it, clear the bed. But some of the plants we remove first may be covering bare soil, feeding beneficial insects, protecting the ground from heat, or revealing what is happening beneath the surface. That does not mean every weed should stay. Some spread aggressively, some compete with vegetables, some are toxic, invasive, or nearly impossible to control after they produce seed. The real mistake is not removing weeds, it is removing them without asking what they are doing. So before you pull the next unfamiliar plant, ask one simple question: is this plant actually causing a problem here? Because sometimes the difference between a weed and a garden helper is not the species, it is the location. A weed is not a scientific category for a bad plant. It is usually just a plant, growing where someone does not want it. White clover in the middle of a carrot row may compete with young seedlings. The same clover growing along a garden path may cover bare soil and feed bees. A dandelion beside a tiny lettuce transplant may need to go. A few dandelions flowering at the far edge of the yard may be much less of a problem. That is why the best decision is rarely keep all weeds or remove all weeds. Instead, look at three things. Where is the plant growing? How quickly is it spreading? And are its benefits greater than its risks in that specific location? The first plant that makes this idea easy to understand is white clover. White clover stays low, forms a dense living cover, and produces flowers that many bees visit. In pathways or around the edges of a garden, that can be useful. It protects exposed soil, tolerates some foot traffic, and keeps empty spaces from filling with taller weeds. Clover is also a legume. It works with bacteria around its roots that can fix nitrogen from the air, but this is where gardening advice often becomes exaggerated. Clover does not instantly pour free nitrogen into the vegetables growing beside it. Much of that nitrogen remains tied up in the plant and its root system while the clover is alive. The main benefit comes through long-term soil cycling, especially after plant material and roots begin to decompose, and clover can still compete for water, light, and space. Benefits: ground cover, flowers for pollinators, useful in living pathways. Risks: competition with seedlings, spreading into beds, hiding the soil surface. So keep clover in paths, orchard areas, or controlled edges if it is useful there. Remove or thin it when it moves into seedling rows, crowds small vegetables, or makes it difficult to inspect the base of your plants. The lesson is not that clover is always good. It is that one plant can be useful in one part of the garden and troublesome only a few feet away. The next plant is purslane. Purslane grows flat against the ground, with thick stems and fleshy leaves. It thrives in heat, disturbed soil, and places where many other plants struggle. Because it spreads across the surface, it can shade bare soil and reduce its direct exposure to intense summer sun. Young purslane is also edible after correct identification and when it comes from clean, untreated ground. But do not let that turn into another gardening myth. Purslane is not harmless just because it is edible. It can spread quickly around young vegetables, and pieces of its stem may survive if they are left on moist soil. That means careless weeding can actually help it multiply. Soil coverage, high. Heat tolerance, high. Spreading risk, high. Ease of control, medium. Add a small note beneath the graphic: practical rating, not a scientific measurement. If purslane is growing in an empty corner or beneath mature, widely spaced plants, a small patch may not be urgent. But if it is covering newly sown rows, competing with seedlings, or moving throughout the entire bed, remove it before it becomes difficult to manage, and do not leave fresh pieces lying on damp ground. This is a good example of selective control. You are not declaring war on the plant. You are deciding where it is allowed to grow. Now consider the dandelion. Few plants are removed more automatically. Dandelions develop deep taproots, survive dry conditions, and flower early in the season. Their flowers can provide food for insects when relatively few other plants are blooming. But dandelions are sometimes oversold as perfect pollinator plants. They can be useful, but they are not a complete replacement for a diverse range of native flowers. Their presence can also suggest disturbed, compacted, or frequently mowed soil. However, one dandelion is not a laboratory test. Dandelions may suggest disturbed or compacted soil, but one plant cannot replace a soil test. That distinction matters. Wild plants may reveal patterns, but they cannot tell you everything about soil, pH, nutrients, drainage, or structure. Use them as clues. Then confirm the possible problem by observing the area or using a proper soil test. Inside vegetable beds, the main issues with dandelions are space and seed production. A mature plant can shade small crops, while its flower heads can produce large numbers of wind-blown seeds. A practical compromise is simple. Remove dandelions from active vegetable rows, especially near seedlings. If you keep a few around less managed edges, remove the flower heads before they produce seed if uncontrolled spreading is a concern. Next is chickweed. Chickweed is a low-growing plant that prefers cool, moist conditions. It often appears in spring or during mild weather when exposed soil stays damp. A light patch can act as temporary ground cover. It protects the surface, slows erosion, and is often easy to pull while the soil is moist. Young chickweed is also considered edible after confident identification, but chickweed can quickly change from a small patch into a dense mat. That mat may cover tiny carrots, lettuce, onions, and other slow-growing crops before you realize what is happening. It also produces seed readily, so chickweed is useful only while it remains easy to control. You may leave it temporarily on bare ground, but remove it around young crops and before it forms a thick carpet. The next plant looks innocent while young, but becomes much more difficult later. Lamb's quarters can begin as a small, soft-leaved seedling and grow into a tall plant that shades the vegetables around it. Its young leaves are edible after correct identification and are commonly used cooked. But again, edible does not mean harmless. A large lamb's quarters plant can consume water, block sunlight, and produce an enormous number of seeds. And the idea that it collects nutrients and then feeds neighboring vegetables while it grows is misleading. Those nutrients are stored inside the plant. They only return to the soil after the plant decomposes, and even then, the result depends on how that material is managed. Young plant, manageable. Large plant, strong competition. Seed stage, future weed problem. If you want to harvest a few young leaves from a clean area, do it early. If the plant is growing beside tomatoes, peppers, or young greens, remove it before it becomes tall and before seed heads develop. This is one of the clearest examples of timing being more important than labels. Young and controlled, the plant may have a use. Large and producing seeds, it becomes next year's problem. Now let's look at broadleaf plantain, also called Plantago major. This is not the tropical fruit. It is the low, rosette-shaped plant commonly found in lawns, paths, and compacted areas. Plantain tolerates foot traffic and dense soil extremely well. That makes it valuable as a signal. If it repeatedly appears in the same path or corner, the soil there may be compacted, poorly aerated, or frequently disturbed. But the plant itself is not necessarily fixing that problem. It is simply better adapted to those conditions than many garden crops. Plantain, possible compaction. Moss, persistent moisture, shade, or both. Purslane, hot, disturbed ground. Chickweed, cool, moist, exposed soil. At the bottom, indicators suggest patterns. They do not prove soil conditions. Use these plants to decide where to investigate. In a walkway, a little plantain may be harmless. Inside a vegetable bed, its broad leaves can occupy valuable space, and established roots may become difficult to remove. The most useful part may be the message it gives you. Perhaps that area needs less foot traffic, more organic matter, or gentler soil management. Another plant worth discussing is stinging nettle. Nettles can support certain insects, and their leaves contain nutrients that eventually return to the soil when properly composted. They are also sometimes used to make homemade plant feeds, but claims about these mixtures are often exaggerated, and their nutrient strength is difficult to measure. They should not be treated as a precise replacement for balanced fertilizer. Nettles also spread aggressively in favorable conditions, and their stinging hairs can make them unpleasant or unsafe around paths, children, and pets. So nettles are not something I would casually leave inside a vegetable bed. If you choose to keep them, place them in a controlled area away from regular foot traffic. Cut them before seed production and prevent their underground growth from spreading into crop areas. This is an important reminder. A plant can have ecological value and still be unsuitable for the center of your garden. The final plant is yarrow. Yarrow is often treated as a weed because it appears without permission and can spread through both roots and seeds. But near a vegetable garden, it can be one of the more valuable wild plants to manage rather than eliminate. Its clusters of small flowers attract a variety of insects, including pollinators and some beneficial predators. Once established, it also tolerates dry conditions better than many ornamental plants. The best place for yarrow is usually not in the middle of a crowded vegetable bed. It works better along a border, near a fence, or in a dedicated pollinator strip. That gives insects access to the flowers without allowing the plant to compete directly with vegetables. If it begins spreading into crop rows, cut it back or divide the plant. Yarrow is a perfect example of a plant moving from the category of weed to the category of managed resource. You are not allowing it to take over. You are giving it a job and a boundary. At this point, one warning is essential. A useful weed can still become a serious problem. Any plant should be removed when it begins shading vegetables, crowding seedlings, reducing airflow, or producing more seed than you can manage. It should also go if it hosts serious pests or diseases, if it is toxic to people or pets, or if it is considered invasive in your region. Local rules matter. A plant that behaves reasonably in one climate may spread aggressively in another. And never eat a wild plant based only on a short video, a phone application, or one photograph. Many plants have dangerous lookalikes. Only use a wild plant as food when you can identify it with complete confidence and know it has not been exposed to herbicides, polluted runoff, pet waste, or contaminated soil. When you find an unfamiliar plant, ask 5 questions. Can I identify it confidently? Is it crowding a crop? Is it about to produce seed? Is it invasive where I live? is its benefit greater than its risk in this location? Those 5 questions lead to 3 possible decisions: keep it, control it, or remove it. This system becomes even easier when you divide your garden into zones. Inside active vegetable beds, keep weeds under strict control. Your crops need access to light, water, nutrients, and moving air. A plant that might be harmless beside a fence can become a serious competitor beside a row of young carrots. Along paths and outer edges, you can be more selective. A low plant that protects bare soil or provides flowers for insects may be useful there. In a dedicated pollinator strip, you may allow selected plants to bloom as long as they are not invasive and you prevent them from spreading uncontrollably. And in any part of the garden, remove flower heads before seeds mature when you do not want more of that plant next season. Some young weeds can also be added to compost, but avoid adding mature seed heads, persistent roots, or aggressive plants unless your compost becomes hot enough to destroy them reliably. Otherwise, you may spread those plants everywhere the finished compost is used. The goal is not a wild, unmanaged vegetable garden. The goal is a garden where every plant is judged by its behavior. A useful weed is still a plant growing without your permission. The difference is that now you make the decision based on what it is doing, rather than simply reacting to the label someone gave it. So the next time you see something unfamiliar growing between your vegetables, do not immediately reach for the shovel. Take 30 seconds, identify it, look at where it is growing, check whether it is competing with anything nearby. Notice whether it is about to flower or produce seed. Some wild plants are competitors, some are warnings, some provide temporary ground cover, and some can become valuable garden plants when they are kept in the right place. The lesson is not to stop weeding, it is to stop weeding automatically. Which of these plants grows in your garden? Do you keep it, control it, or remove it? Tell us in the comments and subscribe for more practical gardening advice that helps you understand not only what to do, but why it works.